Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald, Seq Oquawka at Windblown Beads. It takes place in this cabin behind me. The owner is Wendy Alleman, and she's one of 6 women who have joined a group, a support group of artists who get together to develop their skills. Now, we'll be coming back to see how she blows her glass in this cabin, but first you should know that her husband Dan built this by hand after a farm accident. He needed a hobby and he built it as a blacksmith shop. Well, it later became her studio, and we'll watch her work in here. But first, let's go about a mile away and see what those other artists are up to. Linda Sickman, I'm seeing that even I, who don't know much about art, knows that you're a potter. I can tell. And it's going pretty quick. Mm-hmm. You had an idea several years ago that there was this group of women, 6 women artists, could help each other. How did you think they could help each other?
Well, the original idea came from a friend of mine out in Seattle, Washington, who belonged to some art groups. Mm-hmm. And she kept sharing with me their projects and the fun they were having and what she learned or didn't learn, or that kind of thing. And I just was always so jealous. I thought, gosh, that would be so much fun. Mm-hmm. And so I came home, and the more I thought about it, I thought, well, we had a little group that we used to do studio lunch, and everybody bring their lunch and just get together, so we didn't all sit out here in the country and be by ourselves. And so that was kind of the beginning, and then we talked to Lori and added Sally along the way. Mm-hmm. And we all work in different material, but it's fun to see how a lot of times we cross lines with each other. Mm-hmm.
So you've got 3 potters.
We have 3 potters.
And a windblown glass artist.
Right.
And what else?
Fiber. Sally works in fiber. Uh-huh. And then Lori does collage. Mm-hmm.
So you know what it sounds to me? It sounds to me it's kind of like a book club, except you're producing things instead of reading things.
Right.
And how do you all help each other?
A lot of times we were just getting ready for our show in December, and I had a project I was working on that came out of one of our subjects for our meetings. And I had an element for it that I was really struggling with. So 2 or 3 meetings, I would bring different things to the meeting. I said, okay, does this work? Does this work? Mm-hmm. And none of it worked. And they kept saying, no, this is not, And so finally, one day, Lori and I had been emailing, and I had this idea, and finally just sort of scrapped everything. And then I went back to this idea I have a workroom upstairs, and I started pulling out materials, and it just all came together in like an hour. Mm-hmm. I had almost all my finished projects for what I needed for that added element. And it was just through their input and critiquing and being honest and saying, no, this doesn't work, or this does work.
And so you all have even shown together?
Yes, we have. Mm-hmm.
Where was that?
At the Buchanan Art Center for the Arts on the square in Monmouth. Mm-hmm. And the director, Susan Toomey, wanted to show what the process of process, and that's basically what we're dealing with here. So we all had these subjects that we had drawn from, and then a lot of us had taken a subject and then sort of ran a little farther with it, developed it a little bit more. And so she thought that would be interesting to the public. So we had the gallery set up with those examples of those projects. Mm-hmm. And then we each then had sort of a little area where we showed the actual pieces that we had, expanded on the idea with, and how we got from point A to
Does the group have a name?
Well, should I tell him? No, Lori's saying no. Wendy's saying yes.
You need a new name. I take it you need a new name.
It was just sort of a fun, silly. We originally called ourselves the Floozies, but the idea was that you would. Nothing was too much to do for your art. So, but that was sort of a loose interpretation. Yeah,
okay,
the 6 Floozies. But
now, I noticed that you've gotten away from of your cylinder now, and you just kind of mushed that.
Well, I threw it without a bottom, and then I pulled water underneath underneath it. And then that is the beginning shape for those oil cans.
You know, this, and I found that I was fascinated with this, and I asked you to start one of these. This is what you actually are working on now, something
Right.
of this kind of
Right.
shape.
I would let this sit until it's firmer, and then I would put a bottom and a top, and then I would throw a spout and add those other
Isn't
elements
that
when it's
neat?
firmer and easier to
Yeah,
handle.
it really looks like metal.
That-
It really
yeah,
does.
That's what that
That's
particular
neat.
glaze does.
And you, now you said that you would start on a cylinder, and usually a cylinder is pretty much the design that most pottery
That's
items
pretty
are made
the
of.
basic.
Here's
if
another
you're-
good example
right.
of something that you make. And mugs, of course.
Mugs are very traditional and a good beginning project for most people. They will teach you to throw a cylinder before they teach you to throw anything else.
And then, of course, pot.
The carved jar, I love to carve, and that was a cylinder, and I threw it kind of extra thick. I left it thicker than I
very
would have,
heavy,
so I had room to carve. And when I'm normally throwing, I'm looking out the window, and I interpret the lines on that as if you look out and see the carving represents the lines in the field.
I was going to say that looks like a cornfield.
From the
No, it
from
wasn't
the
really. I'm
plowing
just
and
acting
you know,
smart, but
nature's
I got
always
you. Yeah.
nature's always
It's
a
always
big
in your mind,
input.
isn't it? Yeah. Okay, what are you working on now?
This is the cylinder. I'll make a larger size. You have to center the clay. You're doing this 2 or 3 times.
You know, it really looks easy, but I'm sure that it took you years and years and
did.
years to get to make it look easy.
I thought it was going to be easy because I had always worked with my hands, but when I actually got into it, it was much
well,
more
it's
difficult.
all done by touch, isn't it?
It's very, very little strength. I mean, it's not like you're muscling the clay. And then I go to the center. This is the stage called opening.
That looked really easy too, but I'm sure that took you a lot of foul ups to get.
Oh,
to
many.
Get that.
And when you haven't thrown for a while, sometimes you end up with no bottoms in something.
Well, Carol Tenold, you and Linda share this potter studio.
That's right.
And you look around you and you see all this finished work here, and some of it's yours and some of it's Linda's. But I asked you to put some of yours together for me here so we could get a look at it. You do a large variety of stuff, don't you?
All kinds of things. Schizophrenic potter.
You know, this is interesting. We look at, I was asking you about glazing before. This is a good example of an unglazed piece of pottery and one that's been glazed. This is a finished product, right?
That's a finished product.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then I asked you in the process of this if you would be able to show me how you glaze something.
Be happy to.
Would you do that?
Sure.
Okay. Now, when we were over with Linda at the wheel, we saw some rounded objects, and these would be sort of like they come off the wheel, but these
Right.
are in different
Different
stages,
form.
aren't they?
You're right. This is has been thrown and then taken off wet and set aside and then carved. So this is called leather hard stage. And then you let it dry to this stage, which is called bone dry. And then it goes into the electric kiln and gets fired in there, and it comes out like
Okay.
this.
So this is the last
This has
stage?
been fired once.
Okay, before you
Before you
glaze it.
glaze it. And you actually do that to get it hard enough so that it holds up in the glaze.
And then the glaze, you got the small kiln for
Right.
the first glaze, or first
Right, they all go
Drying.
in there bone dry and no
and the
glaze
big
on
one
it.
for the glazed items.
Correct.
The big hot one.
The big hot
Okay.
one.
All of these tubs are full of glaze, right?
Yes,
Glaze is what causes the coloration, right?
correct.
Beautiful.
But it's seldom the glaze itself is seldom the color that it turns out because we fire in reduction and that pulls different colors out of the clay.
And this is going to be the glaze that you're going to use now.
This is this glaze. And I would first stir it up. And then take the piece and decide how I want the glaze, where I want the glaze to braid, because I'm going to do this by hand, and I can't go all the way in, so I'll come like,
So you just dip it. Okay.
now I would have to wait for this to dry
To do the rest
to
of
do
it?
the rest of it,
Okay.
but if I'm going to get over something that's, let me go over here. I don't want to get this glaze in that bucket. I would wait till it dried, and then to get a different coloring on it, I would
Okay.
add that.
And that sort of explains
That explains how the
how you
white
got this
got
effect
in there,
here.
right?
Okay, all right. And you really probably never know what that's going to look like either until after you bake
Nope.
it, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So we won't handle this anymore, but let's pretend
Okay.
this was ready to go in the kiln
Okay.
now. You just walk around there.
Right? I'll
And-
grab one so I
Okay.
have something to put in.
And this monstrous kiln that wheels in and out of the hot room in there.
Right.
This is a platform for all your stuff.
Yes. And we would just load the piece into the kiln, and then we load another shelf on top of that, all the way up to about here.
You'd do that many items at once.
About 175
Wow.
pots
Wow.
at a time.
And this is on rails, so this then slides into the other room.
Correct.
It slides into that chamber.
Goes inside, we seal it all up, the burners are in the back, and then we light it, and
Yep.
takes about, we light it about 7, 8 o'clock one night,
Yeah.
and it's done by 8, 9 o'clock the next night.
Oh, 24 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's about how long it takes.
Well, Wendy Alleman, among those 6 women that we're
Yes.
introducing today, you're the lone glass blower.
Yes.
Right? And your business is windblown glass. Is that
Windblown beads.
right? Beads. Okay. All right.
Windblown beads.
So, what do you do differently than most glass artists?
Glass blowers usually use a glory hole and a huge pot of melted glass and have very expensive equipment. This is like the tiny baby version of glass blowing. You use a torch alone, which is really nice because it makes it unique to sort of doing it in your home and doing it in your garage and that sort of thing. Not thousands of dollars worth of material.
You do small work, much of it's jewelry, and let's just show sort of an example of some of the things that you do. This is interesting because this is a necklace that's filled with sand.
Beach
Now,
sand.
you described to me that you could fill this with any granular substance. Some people like to carry the remains of their loved ones
Cremation
that
ashes.
have been cremated
Yes.
in these. That's interesting. And this is great. This says the word hope on it, and I think this is an interesting story as well.
It is an interesting story. My family went to Ethiopia last year, and after coming home and seeing what the poverty level was like and what the orphans had to live in, what kind of situation they had to live in, we were excited to find out, try to figure out a way to help them with our jewelry. And it seems silly to think that you could use a glass bead, but we decided we were going to launch a project to try to feed these kids a meal a day. So we sell the necklaces for $30 a day, and we set that price, or $30 a piece, and we set that price because it costs $1 a meal, and we'd like to feed them for a whole month. So each purchase
Isn't that
feeds a
wonderful?
child 1 meal a day for a whole month.
That's
So we've had
wonderful.
phenomenal response to that. People
Yeah.
are very giving.
And this is another example. This is a pendant, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but that's a good example of some of the other work that you can do. And you can bead the necklaces, and it's gorgeous stuff. Okay, so I asked you if you would be ready to go ahead and build something for me. And
Absolutely.
you said, well, I got the torch ready. So you've got some glass set out. These sticks of glass are what you start with.
Yes. Would you like me to go?
You bet.
Okay. First thing I do is, this is called a minor burner torch, and I add the propane. This is propane gas, and this little knob adds oxygen to it, which makes the flame hotter and it burns cleaner. You can see the difference in that flame. And what that's going to do is allow me to get it hot enough. I'm going to put these glasses on. Allows me to get it hot enough to be able to melt it without changing the color of the glass. If you just use propane by itself, it turns the glass muddy and gray. It takes just a bit to warm it up. If I don't wave it back and forth, then that cold glass being introduced in the hot flame will shatter into lots of little pieces, and there'll be hot pieces that fly everywhere. So we'll
Now
just
you're
take it
getting some
easy.
action.
Yeah. So you can see how the end of that is starting to glow orange, and that means I can hold it in there steady. I'm going to rotate it away from me and keep it at a slant. And what that's going to do is it's going to help it ball back up on itself. So I've got a nice little glob of glass to work with. I'm not going to get it very big because what I'm going to do is make a little a little earring.
Okay.
And I'm just going to
Globe.
touch
Lots
it.
of the things you make are little globes. aren't
Yes.
they? Mhm.
It's just like little glass ornaments, only miniature size that you can wear.
Oh, you wrap it around. And what's that metal rod called?
This is called a mandrel, and what it is just a little tiny hollow tube, just like a little mini blowpipe. And I'm going to make it
Oh, and that's going to
small.
enable you to blow into it to create the hollow globe.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'm just going to build this out a little bit, add more glass. I just heat more up on the end, touch it to it, and roll that mandrel away from me. And I can make this as big as I want, and I can add whatever colors
It takes a
of
steady
glass.
hand. Now you're going to put a swirl of different colored
I'm just going to
glass
put a
into
little bit of
it.
the yellow swirl in here. And you can see that's skinnier, so that heats up a lot faster.
Sure did.
Now, every time I make something, it's different and unique because I can only control the melted glass to a certain degree. And after that, it does its own
That's
thing.
part of the charm of it, though, isn't it?
That's
'Cause
what I
even
love.
you don't know exactly what you're going to end up with.
Exactly.
And your customer's assured of a one-of-a-kind item because there's no way you could reproduce that.
That's right. If they lose an earring, they're in trouble. I usually have to make 2 brand new earrings to replace
That's right.
it.
You can't match it.
Okay, so see how it's nice and round there? It's about ready to blow. So I'm just going to give it tiny little breaths of air, like giving CPR to a mouse, and see what happens. Now I've got a little air bubble
Is it
started in
working?
there.
Okay.
It's going to take a little bit
'Cause
more
I didn't
heat.
notice it got any bigger.
And that's probably because I'm talking and I didn't heat it up as long as I usually do.
Okay, my fault.
That's okay.
I'll shut up. Let you go. Aha, aha. Look at that.
There you go.
Wow.
Now, when it cools back down, in just a couple seconds, I'm going to put it in the kiln and we'll anneal it.
Okay, well, I'm gonna
When
get
it
out of the
cools
way
back
there.
down, what's going to happen is it's going to change back to the original colors, that turquoise with that yellow swirl, and it looks orange right now.
Yeah, it does.
After it goes into the kiln, it's going to have about 2.5 hours in the kiln, and when I turn it off, it'll go slowly back down to room temperature, and then it'll be properly annealed, they call it, and that takes the stress from the outside cooling faster than the inside of the glass, kind of heals any little micro fissures that are inside, makes it very strong, and that little bubble, surprisingly, could probably survive bouncing across the cement floor without breaking.
No kidding.
So they don't all do that,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
amazing to me that some of them can.
I asked you to have some ready here for us that had come out of the kiln but had not been cleaned up yet. And this is a good, sort of a good example of, why don't you hold that for me and
Okay.
point to us what you need to do on that yet.
Okay, the glass part is all finished, but you can see that that edge is real rough. So what I'll do is I'll take a little diamond tipped reamer that's like a cone shape, and I'll get it wet and I'll just polish that up, rub that raw edge just a little bit smoother. And then I'll also scrub it out because this bead release, this white powder, will stick to the inside of it and you'll be able to see it through the transparent glass. So I've got little tiny brushes with stiff bristles that I'll scrub that out real good. And then the trick is to keep rinsing it, filling it with water, and rinsing it out, and so there's none of that white residue left in there, so it'll stay clean.
It can be tedious too, can't it?
It's pretty tedious.
Now, I'm going to
yes.
hold this because you liked this piece, because this is something you do that not too many people do.
Right.
And this is an example of the swirl that you had different colors glass in there. But this is also not perfectly round. It's got a shape to it that's unique.
Exactly. Well, what I'll do is I'll blow a little round bubble, just like I showed you, and then on the outside end, I'll put a little heat just directed towards the outside of that bubble, and then stick my piece of hot glass to it and pull it out, and that's what pulls it into that little little teardrop shape there.
And then I also noticed it's got on the back, it's got a flattened, and almost like you put your thumb in.
And I've got wonderful tools that if you work quick enough and it's still hot, you can just smash it to shape it. And if you have a big piece like that and it's round, it doesn't really wear very well. It kind of rolls around on
Oh,
you.
so you smash
So if
the
you
back.
flatten it, then it really makes
Yeah.
it lay nicely when you go to wear
It
it.
sure does. Look at that.
So, and this is another example of a disc. It started out nice and round, just like this, and then you heat it just slightly. Actually, while it's still hot, you blow it, and while it's still hot, then you smash it. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong in this process. Many things that can go wrong in this process.
Well, it's fascinating. I want to thank you for showing it to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Lori Reed, you have found a way to combine your love of photography with manipulating it into visual arts,
Yes.
which is a method that I had never heard of before. And I'm going to go ahead and show one of your photographs that you took when you were out west. and then we're going to show what you did with it.
Okay.
But your tool, one of your tools, is a paper shredder.
Yes.
How in the world did you ever figure it out?
Well, I had been wanting to work larger. I can only run out a sheet that's 8.5 by 14 from my laser printer. And I had started kind of what they call tiling out an image so that I'd have sections of it printed out bigger on paper, and I would cut those into rectangles or tear them to make a larger collage. Then I had a Knox College student ask me if I would do a little workshop for some students on campus involving found materials and working with the theme of recycling and keeping a small footprint on the earth. So I was trying to think what college students could bring to this workshop to suggest to them beyond magazines, maybe old homework, and what could they do with it, in their environment, and thought, well, perhaps they could just shred some paper. And in thinking of that, kind of a light bulb went on of I could shred my prints I'm running out. Instead of cutting them or tearing them, what would it do if I shredded them and had these long strips to work with, and how big could I go with that, or how would it make the photograph go to a new level
Well,
so
let's
that
just
it's beyond
see.
a
Let's
photograph?
just see how that would work. Okay, now this is on a wooden frame, and these are actually strips. And if you look very closely, you can see that the shredder is about a quarter of an inch wide. Each one of these is a shredded strip that you had to put back together.
Yeah, I use acrylic matte medium to glue the strips down, and then I coat the entire piece with that matte medium again so that it's all encased in that polymer for longevity.
And then if you want to go bigger, you just put these together, and
Yeah.
you've got what you call a triptych, or I guess that's
diptych,
a diptych.
yeah.
Oh, triptych
Yeah.
would be 3, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
diptych.
so in this original photograph that you showed, I realized I didn't want to work as high. I picked out this narrower piece and just sort of truncated the forms.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But because I've, in Adobe Photoshop, manipulated the photograph a couple of different ways and shredded that to have,
And
light
you've got
and
some
darks
items
and-
in here too that just don't belong. So if you're looking at this thing and you're kind of studying it, you're saying, wait a
Yeah.
minute.
These are pieces from my great uncle's ledger from his butcher shop from the 1800s. I've got some art papers that are just solid or
That's
have a different
funny.
pattern to kind of blend in.
And your group, this artist group, has a monthly theme, and this month was books. And so you built this double frame.
Yeah, I thought,
with the
okay,
same
how about
method.
shredding books that I have? So this was the first one I did where I used several different books in order to get the different colorations with yellowed paper. And this book had this very nice warm brown. I've got etchings that were in the book or scientific photographs. And so this one was about the different colorations, keeping that text in there, and also having something to kind of give you a little eye flow through the book with the illustrations kind of carrying the weight of it. So after I did this one, I wondered about just shredding all pages from one book rather than multiple books. So this other one was all from a geography book, and I've kept, the facing pages of my book with the heading, and then there were maps, some in color, some were illustrations. There were etchings of scenes out west, or this one's, a Midwestern hog farm, and just tried to keep a sense of
Very
that
interesting.
encyclopedia on a 2-page spread.
Thank you, Lori. Sally Scott, let's talk about fiber and knitting and knotting and however you put all this stuff together. It's quite a collection, and you do, I see you're in the process of putting one together right now. You teach knitting.
Yes.
And I guess what you wanted to do was you wanted to take knitting to a higher level.
Yes. Or to other people, and I wanted personally to take knitting and fibers to a higher level by joining this group. And what you see here are projects that I am currently working on. These items are for our focus this month, which is book. It's a timeline, a bit of a timeline for what I've done in the past 6 or 8 years to begin a business of my own, where I teach knitting and I practice yoga daily. And it's kind of my clubhouse where I get to do what I want all day long. So
This is interesting here. You're working on this sweater.
yes.
And this is, you described to me, this is different because I'm going to cut this sweater up
Right.
the middle when I'm finished, which
Right,
is a
right.
daring thing for an artist to
Right.
do. But these are interesting too. These are chicken scratch pottery.
Yes,
These buttons,
they are.
isn't that something? You
Yeah.
wouldn't think that's pottery.
Yeah, Mary Skidema, who is one of our group, she, all the ladies have been so supportive in my endeavor. And when I said to her, Mary, I need some really cool, neat buttons. So she was able to do that for me. I saw them at the shop, but these are the ones I chose for my project because I thought they just really they're going to make that sweater just beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and you've had to grow through all this. Now you brought a sample of what you call lace knitting, which is one of your earlier works. You've gotten better at this, haven't you?
Yes, this particular piece was my very first. Yes, it's don't look too closely, but yes, I'm very proud of it because it is my very first piece, and it's going to be a part of my.
That was your springboard.
Yes, it was, and I'm doing better, but
Well,
it's not my best work. So.
Well, thank you for
Thank you
showing
very
it to us. I
much.
want to thank all 6 ladies who are part of this group, the Women's Art Workshop here near Oquawka. They get together once a month in this support group, in this learning group, and every month they choose a topic. So I said, well, what's your next topic? And they said, well, we're just going to pick it out of a pot. So I said, well, can I do that? So I'm going to surprise them with their next topic of conversation and work next month. Oh my goodness. You're all going to love this. Cubist conundrum. Yeah. Yeah. Good luck with that one. With another Illinois story, we might have to come back for that. With another Illinois story near Oquawka, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.